Hi everyone, welcome to the Whiteleyverse with me, Connor Whiteley, for another daily short story. Now, before I start today's story, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you want to buy this short story and any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers and at your local bookstore and local library if you requested, and you can order paperback copies from Amazon. Now, here's today's short story. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did writing it.
Holidays, Burnout, Love. Benji Michaels had never been one for falling in love. Lots of people often thought of him as too serious, focused on university and studying to have fun at parties, clubs, and more of the partying side of university. In truth, Benji never believed he was too serious. He only didn't like the drinking side of university. He loved people, hot guys, and actually talking to everyone, but he hated with a passion the loud, awful music that was pumped so loud he couldn't hear a person standing right next to him. As Benji sat on the awfully uncomfortable fabric computer chairs at the university library, at the very end of the massive row of computers on the top floor, Benji couldn't wait for the Christmas holidays to start in a few hours. A lot of students had already left, but Benji still had one more biomedical science lecture to attend in the late afternoon before he could officially leave. All his friends had left yesterday, and as much as he wanted to join them, he was a tad too dedicated to his studies. And as stupid as it sounded, Benji didn't want the poor lecturer to be all alone. If the lecturer was going to put the effort in, then Benji wanted to be kind enough to at least turn up. The quiet mutters in the distance was the only sound, despite the humming, vibrating, and slightly popping of the old computers that filled the library. Lots of students would have been drained by the silence, but Benji wasn't. Unlike other students, Benji liked coming to the library for the quiet. It allowed him to concentrate, focus, and actually achieve something. Benji truly loved his parents and younger and older siblings at home, but they were a nightmare when he wanted to achieve something at home. That's why Benji always came here on Friday afternoons. The sense of strong flowery perfume, with hints of cedarwood, pecans, and cloves, started to fill the air and leave the taste of Christmas cookies on Benji's tongue, strangely enough, and he instantly knew who was going to turn up sooner or later. His best friend Victoria Harris always wore way too much perfume, but Benji didn't mind. Her attitudes and friendship more than made up for any problems the overwhelming smell caused. The computer beeped as Benji opened up his university emails and saw one from a slightly older university student. A senior, a year ahead of Benji, who Benji had to admit was very fit, hot, and sexy. Benji had always had a thing for Ezra Hawks ever since he had met him a few months ago, when a professor Benji was helping out his year introduced them. Benji had no idea whatsoever if Ezra was into men, but he was hot. All Benji could do was bit his lip at the idea of them two talking, laughing, and spending time together. As Victoria had said, they barely knew each other, but Benji had spoken to Ezra a few times, and he always made Benji feel like a schoolboy, happy and alive. Victoria tried to understand, but Benji knew she didn't. And he couldn't blame her. How to fall for a guy you barely know? As Benji tried to forget about those doubts, he read the email and hoped it was a response to the work Benji had submitted to Ezra to get his opinion on. Since Benji was hardly the best student on essays, it was the so-called writing style that he struggled with the most, and he really hoped Ezra would want to meet up and give him some tips. To Benji's frustration, Ezra had agreed to give some feedback, but not in person. Benji just smiled at his little attempt to see the hot, sexy man in person, but it had failed. But at the end of the day, Benji was just happy for any guidance Ezra could give him. Yet to Benji's surprise, the email was rather coldly written compared to normal, and it was a very formal apology saying that Ezra didn't have time to give feedback this side of the Christmas holidays, and he would do it next year. Benji finished the email and just felt like there was something more to it. He was partly glad that Victoria wasn't here yet, because she probably would have said he was overthinking it. But Benji had spoken, email and met Ezra plenty of times, and in every single email, Ezra was a delight to talk to. Something else was going on, and even though Benji wasn't even friends with him, he still wanted to find out more. As Victoria's heavy high heels pounded towards Benji, he just looked at the tall, beautiful brunette that was his best friend. Thankfully, she was good friends with Ezra, and Benji really wanted her to do some spying for him. Ezra Hawks had always wanted to go to university ever since he was a young teenager. He wanted to develop his knowledge, get a degree, and get a professional job so he could help as many people as he possibly could. That was one of the advantages of doing biomedical science. There were so many jobs you could do that paid very well and helped a lot of great people too. But as Ezra stood in one of the university's many cafes, with its rows upon rows of little tables, booths, and a few other students sitting around, Ezra just wished he wasn't so committed to his studies. He wished he wasn't here anymore, and he was home. So many of his friends had already gone home, and as much as Ezra wanted to do that, he felt like he wanted to do a lot more than just leave university for the Christmas holidays. He was seriously considering giving up for good. Ezra rather liked the scents of coffee, hot chocolate, and cinnamon that filled the air, as all other students bought their fuel to keep them going until the end of the university day. Ezra stood holding his own hot chocolate, and he was just enjoying the warmth radiating from it and considering his future. He had been working so hard so late, reading as much as he could, working as much as possible on his dissertation and everything else that was expected of a first-class final year student. And he hated it. Ezra had been throwing up from the stress for the past 3 nights. He hadn't been eating, and he had lost half a stone recently too. Ezra didn't feel rubbish, but he felt like that was a dangerous sign too. Yet the most concerning thing of all of his troubles was Ezra didn't have anyone to talk to. Ezra couldn't talk to his amazing friends because they were all doing great and loving life. He couldn't talk to his family because he didn't want to admit failure, and most of his family believed in it was first-class grades or nothing. And Ezra didn't want to tell his professors in case he looked bad. Ezra was burned out, trapped, and didn't know where to go. A group of friends laughing as they walked out of the cafe made Ezra smile briefly. He wanted to do that with his friends, but he knew sooner or later they would talk about their projects and he would feel terrible. Ezra had felt bad enough emailing that sweet boy Benji earlier and telling him he couldn't look at his work this year. Benji was such a sweet, wonderful guy that Ezra did want to get to know better. There was something so innocent, cute, and adorable about him. Ezra loved Benji's little button nose, boyish grin, and stunning emerald green eyes. And strangely enough, Ezra just felt so at home around him. Sure, he had only met Benji a few times, but he loved each of those times. It was just a shame Ezra didn't feel like he could tell anyone, because he didn't want to be judged. And surely, a relationship could never work out with Ezra, perhaps moving to another university after his undergraduate degree. "Hey, EZ," Victoria said as she hugged Ezra. Ezra was a little surprised to still see her here. He took Victoria for the type of girl that would leg it from university the second she could. But it was great seeing her. Probably one of his only true friends. "Thought you would have left yet," Ezra said. Victoria weakly smiled. "Well, I thought so too. I have a lecture later, but wanted to skip it, but Benji convinced me to stay." Ezra forced himself not to shiver in delight as she said Benji's name. To his annoyance, because he never acted like this with anyone else, Ezra felt the urge to go to Benji, talk to him just so Ezra could feel at home and relax. It was so strange how he could just do that so naturally around Benji. He didn't know why, but he did. "Is he okay about me not looking at his bits?" Ezra asked. Ezra almost blushed about looking at Benji's bits. But he managed to stay professional, yet he'd been lying if he said the idea hadn't crossed his mind. Victoria's smile deepened. "You know you can do no wrong in his eyes." He's sweet on you, and you know it. And what's wrong? Ezra didn't want to hear about Benji's feelings. He wasn't sure he felt the same, and he really didn't want to do anything that would end up hurting Benji later on. What you mean up with me? Ezra asked. Victoria forced herself to sigh. Darling, easy. Come on, you don't send Benji formally cold emails. What's wrong? Ezra bit his lip. He didn't think he had been that obvious, but he really wanted to sound like he liked and was interested in Benji, just in case he felt the same. Ezra wanted to kick himself for acting like this. Maybe he was a lot more interested in Benji than he thought. But he couldn't get involved with him. Not with Ezra struggling with university. That wasn't fair on either of them. But maybe Victoria could help. Ezra carefully took Victoria over to one side of the little cafe and told her about him struggling, being sick, and not wanting to get Benji involved or hurt by a guy like him. Victoria hugged him. Benji might be good for you then. He likes you a lot. He might be some good stress relief, if you get what I mean. Ezra really liked the idea of that, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. And then Ezra just looked around the university cafe and realized he really didn't like any of this. He didn't like the university, the work, and the rest of it, and he just wanted to escape it all for a little while. Christmas was a week tomorrow, so if he really wanted it, he could escape for a week and relax. He could go traveling, see the sights of England he had always wanted to see, and there were always cheap deals around, so it was possible. Ezra really smiled at the idea of traveling. He loved seeing different places, experience new things, and it would give him the space to know what he wanted out of life. What? Victoria asked. Ezra slowly looked at her. I'm going to travel for a week. I'll leave tonight and I'll know by Christmas what I want from my life. Ezra was hoping Victoria would look happy for him, but she didn't. Her face sort of dropped, and Ezra instantly felt bad. Victoria probably looked like that because Ezra had never been much of the spontaneous type. Normally, he was an extreme planner, and the idea of him going traveling was probably unthinkable. But it was what Ezra needed, and as much as he loved her as a friend, she wasn't going to stop him from doing this and making a decision. And he told her so, and kissed her on the head. Benji stood up next to his computer on the top floor of the university library, and stared out of the massive floor-to-ceiling windows out over the freezing cold campus. He really didn't want Victoria to tell him anything bad was happening, but he was really concerned about Ezra. Without a shadow of a doubt, Benji knew how silly he was for being concerned, because he barely knew Ezra at the end of the day. But he couldn't help but feel like there was a connection between them. A connection Benji wanted to explore so badly. We have a problem, Victoria said, and she quickly told Benji about Ezra struggling of late. Benji completely failed to hide his surprise. Ezra had always been so confident, hot and sexy whenever anyone spoke to him, that Benji never would have imagined he was struggling with university. And I think he's going to quit university, Victoria said. Benji's eyes just widened. But Ezra has always wanted to help others. He wanted to become a first responder or paramedic. If he quits, he would throw his life away. Benji was surprised at the small beads of sweat dripping down his face. He didn't want Ezra to do this. He wanted him to stay at the university and complete his degree. He just knew that if Ezra left now, then he would never forgive himself, and Ezra would be doomed doing jobs he never wanted to do. His life would be miserable. But most importantly, Benji wanted Ezra to stay so he could see his beautiful face, amazing body, and that killer smile that always made him feel so much better. How do I stop him? Benji asked. Victoria shrugged. Don't know if you can. I have to, Benji said. I have to try. Ezra needs to stay. Victoria took a few steps closer. What? Benji focused on the small snowflakes that were starting to fall across the university campus. I care about him, and I would never forgive myself if I didn't try, Benji said. Victoria smiled. Don't you think you're being a bit selfish? Benji threw his arms up in the air. She was being impossible. No. Benji shouted. This isn't about me. This is about all the people Ezra will never help. Victoria started laughing. What? Benji asked. Victoria hugged him. That's how you convince him to stay, and I told him you're sweet on him. Benji rolled his eyes. He didn't want her to tell him that, and seriously, saying he was sweet on him made Benji sound so old. But maybe there was a point to this. How did he react? Benji asked. Victoria shrugged and started to walk away. He didn't, my dear. And I have a train to catch, and you have a man to save. Happy Christmas, and see you in the new year, Ben. As annoying as Victoria could be, he did love her as a friend. She could be mystic, uncaring, and completely not dedicated to her studies, but she was probably the best of friends he could ask for. And she was right. Benji quickly packed up his things and raced off to find Ezra. He had to stop him. Ezra was really looking forward to traveling up to the Lake District for a week to help clear his head. He was really looking forward to walking through the amazing hills, looking at the wonderful lakes, and just being far from urban areas and in nature without another person around. Ezra still smiled at what his parents had said earlier when he phoned them. They were proud of him for knowing what was right for him. They would love him no matter what, or they were concerned about him. He was concerned about himself too. As Ezra popped open the booth of his little black car that was still parked at the university, he started to put his laptop inside, and his stomach started to get tighter and tighter. Ever since Victoria had told him that Benji liked him, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Ezra loved how sweet, caring, and great-looking Benji was. He was almost tempted to ask Benji to join him for the week, but wasn't that wrong? Wasn't this week away meant to be about being alone and thinking about what was right for his future? No. Ezra couldn't invite Benji. His stomach tightened again as he closed the booth, and the cold dampness of the weather increased as small snowflakes started snowing down. Ezra didn't know how cold it was going to get in the Lake District, but at least he would be alone and able to think. Before Ezra got in his car, he took a final look round the university, and he wasn't sure if he would be back. He loved it here, he loved the learning and the people, but it just wasn't agreeing with him. Ezra had already been sick again as he was coming out to his car. Thankfully, the bathrooms were close by. The fresh vanilla scent from his car air refresher made Ezra smile as he got into his car, closed the door, and started the engine. He was leaving the university, and he properly wasn't going back. Ezra had to admit it would have been great to get to know Benji better, see him smile, and even ask him out on a date. But Ezra couldn't bring himself to start a relationship with that sweet man if Ezra wasn't going to continue at university. It just didn't seem fair. Ezra looked about and started reversing out of the parking bay. He hit something. Ouch. There was something so familiar and sexy about the person who shouted out, but Ezra quickly got out of his car, and his hands covered his mouth when he saw he had hit Benji. The cute sexy man was just laying there on the biting cold ground, holding his ankle and hissing out in pain. Ezra lifted him up, and Ezra loved the feeling of Benji's hard, smaller body against his, and Ezra helped Benji into the passenger front side. Ezra quickly ran round to the other side, and he sat in the driver's seat. I'm so sorry, Ezra said. After a few moments, Benji started laughing, as the pain was clearly starting to ease off. It's probably my fault too. I sort of raced out to get you before you left. Ezra rubbed his eyebrows. He couldn't believe that Victoria ran straight to Benji, the very man he was trying to spare the feelings of. He didn't want to do this, but he was clearly going to have to be straight with such a beautiful man. Benji, Ezra said. Wait. Listen, Benji said. I know you're struggling, but you'll pass. That's all that matters. You don't need to be a first-class student for everyone. All you have ever wanted to do was help people and become a paramedic or first responder. Ezra nodded. He didn't know why he had forgotten that. He had been so focused on pleasing his parents and family that he had forgotten why he was doing this in the first place. Benji hissed as he moved his ankle, and he leant closer to gently rub Ezra's hands. Ezra couldn't believe how amazing it felt to have Benji holding and rubbing his hands. And all I want for you is to be happy and do what you want with your life. Even if you don't want me, Benji said. Ezra didn't know what to say. Of course, he wanted to go out with Benji, see what their relationship would bring, and everything, and it was amazing that he actually cared about Ezra as much as he did. Ezra just. Benji kissed him. Ezra loved the amazing softness and sweetness of his lips against his. Then Benji pulled away and gestured that he was getting out of the car. Sorry. Just wanted that in case you do leave, Benji said. Benji popped open the door, but Ezra grabbed his hand. Ezra couldn't leave the university, his future, or this beautiful man, without at least trying out a relationship. And Ezra couldn't think of a better way to test out a relationship than going away together. He had already paid for the room, and it did come with a large double bed. Come with me. Please, Ezra said. He was expecting Benji to say no, leave him, and protest something rotten. But he just smiled, got back in the car, and kissed Ezra again. It was the first of many passionate kisses before they left the university car park. On their last day of their little holiday together, Benji stood outside their little wooden hut in the middle of nowhere in the freezing cold. The air was wonderfully crisp with hints of damp coldness and pine that was so delightful to breathe in. Benji had left Ezra sleeping in their sensational double bed that had plenty of use over the past week, and Benji actually couldn't believe how perfect the last week had been. Benji had absolutely loved talking and hiking and exploring with Ezra about everything that they wanted to achieve, their families and the rest. They had both laughed plenty of times about how similar they were. They both grew up in similar places, and they just had so much in common. In 1 week, they had felt such a strong connection to each other, and that connection had only grown in the past week. Benji was really looking forward to the future that they would make together, and that was definitely true. And thankfully, both Benji's and Ezra's families had video called their sons over the holiday, so they got to briefly meet each other. Benji loved Ezra's family because of their liveliness, energy, and personalities. And they loved him, according to Ezra. It was the same for his family. As Benji felt 2 wonderfully strong arms wrap around him from behind, he kissed Ezra's arms and turned around. Benji loved Ezra, in his posh gray jumper and wonderfully styled hair that Benji had messed up plenty this week. And they both smiled at each other like lovers and schoolboys do. Because this was going to be the start of an amazing final day of their holiday, and the start of something much, much longer. But just as special, if not more so.
Welcome back everyone, it's me again, Connor Whiteley. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's story, because I flat out love writing, creating stories and sharing them with you. If you really enjoyed today's story, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the internet engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithms. And if you want to buy this short story or any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get them from your local library if you requested, and you can order the paperback copies from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Lastly, if you want to support the channel on a one-off basis, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Also, if you know anyone who would enjoy today's story, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the channel. So, thanks for watching the Whiteleyverse, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.